What is up, people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Welcome to my Hawkeye episodes 1 and 2 review and breakdown. Now, this video will be more of like the overall impressions and thoughts that I have about this series, similar to what I did with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki. I will get into more kind of meticulous breakdowns as the episodes release. Not to say that we won't be talking about some theories and the details in this episode and some theories pertaining to what is really going on there with Jack, the new fiance, shall I say, or even Eleanor herself with some Madame Masque theories going out there. I mean, we all know the Marvel fandom with each one of these shows. We do like to go down the rabbit hole quite a bit, and it feels good to finally have an opportunity to flesh out this character. So, first of all, I just want to say this. I was pleasantly surprised. Not that I was having any expectations for this to be rubbish or anything like that. It's just, you know, going into it with the trailers, it felt like something that, you know, I was game to see. It had Christmassy vibes to it. I'm a fairly Christmassy person. And, you know, when it comes to Clint, you know, he's had good moments throughout the MCU, but not enough to make us all absolutely captivated by him. But with that being said, this is the opportunity to do so. But even with that said and done, I still wasn't like, okay, I need to see this series. But having seen these first couple of episodes, while I have obviously, you know, a few issues here and there, I was pleasantly surprised with how much I really enjoyed it. I think it's mainly the kind of cast and the entertainment side of it for me. I really like Kate Bishop. I really like Hawkeye in this. He's such an endearing character to me compared to a lot of the other heroes that you get in these, whether it's movies or TV shows. And it's kind of that situation where you have that mission to fulfill in 7 days to reunite with your family in time for Christmas, for Clint to only get caught up in this whirlwind of events. Now, the scene that started off episode 1 was it really appealed to my tastes and up my alley, so to speak, because we had that flashback to 2012, obviously with the Avengers movie, with the invasion of New York, and similar to when we saw the snap happen in WandaVision, it's just, I really appreciate civilian perspectives of events that we usually only get to see through the eyes of our heroes. Now, obviously in those movies, you get this sense of destruction and everything like that, but it's being held, or should I say managed, by very capable people. Now, when you see it from a civilian's perspective, it just kind of adds that extra kind of layer of, I wouldn't want to say necessarily terror, but just it really places you through the eyes of what it would be like if you were in that situation. And also it kind of teed up nicely the somewhat mild origin of Kate Bishop, seeing Hawkeye being a badass in the distance, and not to mention taking out one of the Chitauri coming right at her, and this set up that inspiration that, you know, more or less transformed her life from there on out. But also, you know, it kind of ties into the line later on, I think, was it in episode 2 or episode 1, where she was talking about, you know, Hawkeye, whether you want to sell something or not, when you are somewhat of a public figure, you are, the way I took out of that is you always are selling something, even if it's not what you intend. And in Hawkeye's case, it was inspiration for Kate. She lost her father at the beginning of that flashback, and it somewhat sets the family up for being, I guess, kind of wealthy through his life insurance. I have to just guess that, because they were, I believe, talking about selling that penthouse, but then, as you know, when we pick up in the present day scenes, we can clearly tell that the family haven't been struggling in terms of money. In fact, they seem to be doing the complete opposite. So Kate has had a very somewhat privileged upbringing, you could say, but she's also worked her arse off, whether that's in fencing, she's a very capable black belt fighter, all these kind of little tidbits that, you know, make it very believable. Also, you know, true to the comic book and source material as to how she can handle herself as a capable fighter in the scenes that we see unfold through the first 2 episodes. Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop, just even from like the little bell scene where she got caught, and just, you know, unfolding through those first 2 episodes, she is very, very likable. I was instantly drawn to Kate Bishop. It just feels like she fits into this world and this role very, very easily. The comedy from her personally isn't too on the nose Marvel for me, and you know what I mean. Like, a lot of people have different opinions about this, but, you know, when it comes to Marvel comedy, at least from her, I felt like everything was pretty natural coming out. You know, the moment with the bell, and I like how she added that little attachment, and that's somewhat of a hint, I suppose you could say, for the trick arrows that we will be getting in, I believe, one of those trailers that we got a while back, showing that scene of when they were in the car and Kate was trying to launch those like explosive arrows out. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of condense this down, I love Hailee Steinfeld as Kate Bishop already, and her chemistry with Jeremy Renner's Clint, or Hawkeye should I say, has already had me sold. Like, whether I have issues with the plot or this, that, and the other going forward, I'm still going to be very entertained by these two at the very least in the vigilante form of action. It was quite funny seeing the Steve Rogers musical, just because I can honestly imagine that being a legit thing. This was adapting the Battle of New York, and there was quite a few funny moments in there. I appreciate the little moment with Loki riding on the little Chitauri ship, and that was obviously a nice little callback to when Hawkeye, took him out in that moment. But there was also another moment, even if I'm not mega attached to a show or a movie, I can still be really hit emotionally in moments. And just that moment where Clint saw Natasha on stage, seeing that part almost hit me as hard as it did Clint. I mean, obviously not after what he's lived through, but you see what I mean. And this is what I was trying to talk about earlier with this kind of candid nature to Clint. And that's one of my favorite things about him. He's not really much of an asshole. He's not like this, that, or the other. He's a nice guy, especially at this point in his life, juggling all of these things, and the way that Jeremy Renner gets that across on screen, it just really appeals to me and makes him a very likable character in my books. And yeah, it's just that moment with Natasha, and then obviously there was a little girl who wore her hair like Natasha in Endgame. It really hit home for him, and, say what you will about Endgame, this, that, or the other, this was quite a sad moment. Then we had that scene with Thanos was right on the urinal, which is actually an interesting debate that I've seen people have, believe it or not. But then we have that one guy. There's always that one guy, like, of course they had to put him in there, who wanted a freaking selfie at the urinal. I feel like this was a bit of a meta speak for how this does actually happen to celebrities, and I wouldn't actually be surprised if that happened to Jeremy Renner himself at some point, if he was at an airport having a piss and there's some guy like trying to take a selfie. It's a real issue, and what is wrong with people? This wasn't not realistic, it was actually realistic, unfortunate to say. Then we pick back up with Kate Bishop. She's visiting her mother, and that's where we get Jack. Like a surprise to her, since she's been at school, her mother has found a new guy, which, fast forwarding a little bit to later, she finds out at that party that she's already engaged and getting married to him. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting in terms of theory crafting. Who killed Armand later on in the episode? Was it Eleanor? Could she be Madame Masque, even though the show is playing her to be a very somewhat, innocent kind of character and just the mother and has the best interest for Kate? Or was it Jack, who clearly had some odds against his uncle and they didn't like each other too much? And then there's the sweet rapper, but then there's, I know I'm rambling at this point, but then there's two on the nose with the butterscotch rapper. So is it Eleanor? There's all of these little theories you can go down into, and I don't want to give, I guess, too much away from what they could be adapting from the comics with regards to Eleanor's counterpart and things like that. But as I always say, that the things that make this show most interesting is innovation, not copy and pasting from the comics, which is what allows surprises to happen in these Marvel Disney Plus shows or movies. Like, otherwise, if they copied it word for word, page for page, panel by panel, we would know exactly what is going to unfold. Sure, everyone could be thinking that what happens later on is to do with Jack, and obviously how he was holding back his sword skills in the fencing scene that we got in episode 2, and how his character in the source material is the Swordsman, and obviously, it was very obvious that he knew a lot more of what to do in that fencing with Kate Bishop, and how he just completely Expelliarmused, or should I say disarmed, Kate Bishop's sword. But yeah, looking forward to see where that can actually go, but I've just got a feeling that it isn't Jack, because that's just the obvious choice, the too obvious choice. But then again, I feel like Eleanor is the obvious choice, but at this point, maybe audiences can just see through where things are going to go these days in shows like this. Putting a pause on all of that for a minute, this is where we get some of the scenes with Cliff's family, and, it's meant to be, a Christmas activity every single day from this moment leading up till Christmas, which is, what makes it harder for me, because I'm a bit of a soppy person when it comes to stuff like this. This is why I called, one of my favorite traits or attributes from Clint as a character is his endearing nature, like, whilst also being a badass. Like, normally characters, and yes, I know I was about to say have flaws, and, you know, Ronin was a bit messed up, but one of the most lovable things, without repeating myself too much from earlier, is his nature, an endearing nature like this with his family, and the way he is towards Kate as well, even though he's trying to be a bit distant from her in the scenes that we saw. But this is exactly what we've needed, despite the family later on being kind of shipped off because Clint can't make the flight with them because he's got all of this Ronin suit stuff to deal with. And I know this has absolutely nothing to do with Arrow, but when the guy gave him an extra dish or whatever it was and thanked him for saving the city, it just reminded me of the Oliver Queen, you know, I'm gonna save my city kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's just me projecting that onto that line in this show. But obviously Hawkeye and Green Arrow similarities, but yeah, okay, DC fan, I'll leave. Now, this is when Kate arrives to the party that her mother wanted her to wear a red dress, but she didn't. Good. She looks badass in that black tuxedo. But this is where things get very, very interesting in the episode, because there's the black market thing going on downstairs in like the wine cellar location. But then just before that, we had Kate eavesdropping on her mother. I feel like that's kind of a nice callback to when Kate would eavesdrop on in that beginning scene with her father and her mother. But in this situation, there's clearly more going on that Eleanor is playing completely dumb to. For example, you did see Armand, you know, Jack's uncle, somewhat kind of having a go at her, almost low-key threatening her with something. And, you know, it just makes me think, and there are already theories going around, it's like, what if Eleanor herself was hosting that black market thing down there? What if that is a way of getting some extra money from those recovered items from the Avengers compound? Now, by the way, I'm not putting massive stock into that theory at all, but, you know, whether she is Madame Masque, whether she is doing some shady things like being responsible, for example, the reason why I wanted to lean into this moment quite a bit is because that moment with Eleanor and Armand is probably not meant to be ignored, even though they did set up just after that the moments between Jack and his uncle clearly really being estranged from each other and quite low-key resentful. You're meant to think it's him, but probably what if Eleanor killed him later on because of whatever that moment was there between them in that office. You couldn't make out what the whole argument was about, but I really wouldn't be surprised if in the cliche somewhat story ever since the days of when Kate was a little girl and the father died, she kind of grew to be a woman who got a lot of power and puts on this composed front in front of her daughter and other people, but she's really maybe someone to be quite feared. But that is when Kate does go to the black market meeting. She follows Armand down there. This is kind of a bit of a reflection from the source material and when Hawkeye busted in on a very similar situation. But here they were selling, yeah, basically black market things, from dinosaur bones to recovered things from the Avengers compound. I have to admit, though, like, this is where there are little holes that I'm sure a lot of you don't care about, but it's like, if you've recovered the Ronin suit and Ronin sword from the Avengers compound, why isn't anyone kind of thinking or putting two and two together? It's like, that must mean maybe one of the Avengers was Ronin, but nobody thinks about that, do they? And as for that watch, by the way, I didn't do like proper research into it, because obviously I would have to think if Tony ever wore a watch like that, but yes, I have to assume it's one of Tony's watches, because, you know, like, who else wore a nice-ass watch like that at the Avengers compound? So that is a nice little nod to Tony, I suppose. But this is where the... I don't know why. As Kate said, it's a bit on the nose, don't you think? The Tracksuit Mafia kind of break in with their little gang. And, yeah, this is where some interesting stuff happens. So when it comes to fight choreography, I'm not trying to be pedantic here. It was very entertaining, but there were a few frustrating moments, for example, where Kate, you know, obviously was fighting them after she dressed up in the Ronin suit. Big mistake on her part, but obviously this, you know, sets up the plot for moving forward with what, you know, Clint has to deal with. But, you know, when it comes back to the choreography, when she was fighting, some of the moves and the execution was fantastic. However, there were some plainly very slow-mo frustration moments where, and it wasn't actually put into slow-mo, but what I mean, for example, is the stunt guy would punch her there, she would grab his arm or something, and this arm was doing nothing. And it's just like, why are you waiting to get hit on the head with a wine bottle? Now, those moments were very transparent, which is only why I take a little bit of issue in it. Other than that, I was very entertained, but when there's just obvious moments where stunt guys could be doing that with their hand, but like they allow themselves to get hit, you know, I'm not stupid, and clearly that could have been executed a little bit better, but I understand how, you know, that doesn't always bother everyone. But other than that, pretty cool. Love the moment where Kate managed to save the one-eyed doggy. This is a nice callback to the source material as well, except I believe, you know, he did actually get hit by the car, but that didn't happen here. There is no name as of right now, even though the dog does have a couple of variations of names, whether it's like Lucky. I can imagine maybe Hawkeye might call the dog that, but Kate will have like another name with a pizza reference for the dog similar to that of the source material. But oh man, that dog is so cute. But I have to admit, look, I'm sorry if this is a nitpick, but like, why did that freaking guy, and I'm pretty sure he's probably meant to be someone big, otherwise they wouldn't have shown his face. But hey, yeah, if you're wearing a balaclava, you just literally everyone's aware that there was gunfire at this black market auction. Why did you go like that? And then there's like whole of New York taxis and cars looking at your face, and then you pull it back down and run away. Can you not see Kate Bishop, or like in his mind, Ronin at that moment? Can you not see her through the eye slits that you literally have in your mask, you dumbass? I'm sorry if I'm going too hard, but moments like this really frustrate me. Luckily, though, there wasn't loads of moments like this, but that was one of the deserving, frustrating moments. Naturally, Clint obviously spots that somebody's running around in the Ronin suit, which I kind of felt sorry for him as well in this moment, because again, Clint's character kind of hits me with how genuine he is, and the kind of PTSD to his Ronin days just floods him there. So he's got to try and figure out what the hell is going on, which leads him to go back out there and find her, which, you know, makes up to that ending of the episode. We obviously had Kate go back to the apartment, drop the dog off. But this was obviously quite a rookie mistake, because the Tracksuit and Mafia were obviously tracking her back to her apartment, even though they encountered her on the street afterwards, so they know who she is for her name being on the apartment door. So she's gonna have to kind of have that disconnection at some point in the series, which Hawkeye is working towards as well, freeing her name and separating it from that of Ronin, because obviously she isn't Ronin. But I don't know how he's gonna do that. Like, what's he gonna say? Like, by the way, she's not Ronin. Why would anyone believe him? Unless maybe he unveils himself as Ronin, which would be pretty bad for him because of the things, you know, that he did. Like, I would love your theories there. How is Kate's name going to be disconnected from that of Ronin, from the people of the criminal underworld? But this is when Kate breaks into Amon's place. She finds him there dead. And yeah, he's literally been stabbed in the back with a sword. Once again, this is probably meant to make you think this is Jack, the new fiance or stepfather figure. But it's too obvious, man, I'm telling you. So yeah, again, though, I do feel like it's too obvious if it's the mother. But then, you know, as I said, if you kind of go to a comic book counterpart roots, it could go there. But for the general audience, I'm guessing, like, if you have no knowledge of any of that, it will be quite a surprise if it does turn out to be, oh, the somewhat nice mother Eleanor, if you get my vibe. So I see what they will be going there if they do execute it that way. Kate runs into the Tracksuit Mafia outside. This is where Hawkeye comes in to save the day and confronts her, and he's just like, oh damn, you're just a kid. And then this is where obviously the adventure continues. And I can see why they released both episodes at once, because I feel like to really springboard you into this show, and I don't think the diehard Marvel fans needed that, because they would have been, you know, excited for this week to week regardless if they only just released episode 1. But I think for a lot of other people, not that I have a massive issue with the pacing or anything like that, it just needed these 2 episodes to establish that, oh, right at the end of episode 1, you then get Clint and Kate together. In episode 2, you have that dynamic growing and growing, and yeah, they wanted to give that to you and serve that up on a platter so you could see and hopefully, you know, subscribe to watching this again, you know, week in and week out from here on out. And I think it will sell a lot of people there, because, you know, episode 2, I think, is probably got some of my more favorite moments in it because of just the dynamic between both of them. Because obviously, I mentioned that right at the beginning with my rough overview, we didn't get a whole bunch of them together at all until the very end of this episode, so that doesn't really count. So episode 2, even though I don't feel like it's as strong as episode 1 in some other parts, and I'm mainly on about the live action role-playing part, it does contain some of my other favorite moments with just the dynamic between both of these 2 characters. So now I guess we're moving into episode 2, and I guess I'm going to be slightly repeating myself a little bit here, but the dynamic between those 2 are great. Obviously, Hailee Steinfeld's Kate is a big fan. She was inspired by this man. I mean, imagine seeing a man do what he did in the Battle of New York and just, you know, releasing the arrow grapple hook. And I mean, we're also going to get that in a future episode from what we've seen in the trailers. So she's really living the dream right now. Not only has she dedicated her life from that moment of the Battle of New York to kind of image herself after this Avenger, but now she's hanging out with him. He's in her apartment. He's somewhat trying to help her. You know, that must be mind-blowing for her. And it doesn't come across cringy to me. I mean, I don't know if it did for you, but like, I felt like the fangirling, so to speak, was very genuine. It wasn't like they didn't put too much in there. It was just, it felt natural to me. And I think that's a testament just to how well these two just come across on screen anyway. And that's obviously one of the biggest and most important things of this series. These two characters having a fun dynamic, because without that, well, Kate Bishop and Hawkeye in the Hawkeye show for another several episodes wouldn't really work out so well. The big deal of this episode for Clint is that, well, this is bad because now people believe you are Ronin, like, quite literally. And this is why I said earlier, how is he really going to make that disconnect? Because if Clint says to the Tracksuit people at the very end of this episode, like, well, it's not her, they'd be like, how do you know? How do you know Ronin? You're Hawkeye. So once again, I'm kind of bringing up, how is he going to do that? Maybe it is going to have to be him revealing himself, or unless he wears the suit in a similar situation to where Kate is in the same scene and people see that she is not Ronin. Holy shit, that is the actual Ronin. And to be honest there, even though this is off the cuff for me, saying this theory, I wouldn't be surprised if they did put Clint back in the Ronin suit. And it would be quite a traumatic thing for him to do at the same time, but just to serve some kind of means to an end for this little plot thread that they're addressing. With this, though, and the Tracksuit Mafia tracking her to the apartment, we got that Molotov scene from the trailers. That was pretty fun. Now, I did think this moment was pretty sketchy, but to be fair, it is very true to the character, and a nice shout out to his spy days, and where he, you know, went back to the scene and tried to recover the suit, and he put on the firefighter costume. So that is pretty believable from the character's roots, and he got that lead from the sticker. He Googled it, and I think that guy, I'm guessing he was a firefighter, and that's how he got the suit, you know, was wearing it. And yeah, again, very, very bad, because people might think that guy's Ronin, and if he goes around like that. And in the news at the same time, Ronin is making headlines because Kate was caught saving the dog on television, and people are thinking and linking Ronin's return to the murder of Armand, which is pretty bad. And I'm wondering how that's gonna change if the story develops, and if they find out the real truth of how obviously it wasn't Ronin. I like that they're actually tackling him losing his hearing as well, but just because that is realistic through him not being a superpowered person, and a bit more vigilante-like with the flashbacks in that moment, all of the things that he's endured. Yeah, arguably his hearing would have been blown at some point, and it's got to such a development, and where he even has a hearing aid now. We get a bit more development of the susness of Jack, in where Kate goes to Bishop Security, where, you know, one day she's meant to be working, and Jack there is just, yeah, I mean, it couldn't really be more disingenuous, like, oh yes, me and him were very close and stuff, and Kate is seeing right through that, taking some stabs at him. Now, not to be a party pooper, because don't get me wrong, I was entertained by this scene, but the live action roleplay thing, I'm completely aware that he is a public figure, so Clint marching through there, because he could have just barged through, taken the suit, and just been like, but that would have looked pretty bad on his image, and he's not that kind of guy anyway. If push came to shove, then maybe, but he went along with it. I just felt like this part of the episode, it wasn't unnecessary. I don't want to go that far. It just could have been trimmed down a lot more. It went on a bit longer than what I felt like it needed to. I did have a few cringe moments, especially when that guy was going cling, 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 and I know it was... It's just, this is where the Marvel humor does get a bit too on the nose for fans like myself. I'm all down for Marvel humor. Don't get me wrong. I love movies like Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and stuff like that. It's just this moment was a bit distracting from, I felt like, what could have propelled forward the cool moments in the episode, rather than just like the foam sword moments and stuff like that. I know not everyone's going to be on the same page there. I see both perspectives as well. What I'm saying is that it could have been cut down a lot more. I almost forgot as well that Kate got a phone call from that detective, so he's wanting to know a bit more about the situation that happened with her apartment. That didn't really pick up again for the rest of this episode, so I'm sure the police station scene will be happening maybe in episode 3 or something. Once again, more rubbing of salt in the wound for Clint, in how he hears the kids in the background when he's on the phone to his wife. And it's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna repeat myself at this point. My heart just melts every single time because he has to keep putting up with the shit that's going on elsewhere. We had that whole fencing scene that we've kind of already spoke about, but this led to just a bit more of a public, in front of her mother, confrontation of how he is hiding something. Eleanor's being a bit blind to it, but yet again, it does make me wonder if she is aware more than what Kate would know, and that could be a revelation in of itself in a future episode. This is when, though, it's revealed about that little sweet candy, if you will, of the butterscotch, which sends Kate into overdrive, like, oh my god, my mother could be, you know, dating a guy or getting married to a guy who literally murdered his uncle. This isn't good. Unfortunately, though, at this point, when she was trying to ring Clint, she didn't get through because he allowed himself to get caught so we could have a direct conversation with the Tracksuit Mafia and, you know, perhaps the boss Echo of what we saw right at the very end of the episode. Now, Kate manages to track Clint's phone through Bishop's security that she has on her phone. Very handy. And she goes to the location trying to save him, and in a true rookie way, she falls through the glass. That was all very fun and games, and, you know, that gets them both tied up, and that's when it's revealed at the very end of the episode. There wasn't too much to talk about in this episode. I think that's what I meant by all the live-action roleplay stuff kind of stunting back a little bit of what more this episode could have done. But back onto the main point, you know, introducing Echo, who is, you know, deaf, and she has some pretty damn good abilities, like, you know, reflexes being enhanced through, I guess you could kind of liken that to a Daredevil-esque kind of way, like other senses heightened in a sense. Obviously not quite like Daredevil, but you know what I'm getting at there. And that's going to be an interesting thing that unfolds, because I believe from the trailers, you know, we do see them getting pursued by the Tracksuit Mafia, so I'm guessing a fight is going to break out in this scene. They get away, and that's where Clint will have his trick shot arrows, and, you know, Kate will be deploying them whilst he's driving the car. So, like, all in all, I did enjoy the first 2 episodes of Hawkeye. I think more than what I thought I would. I try and with everything, by the way, even with things I'm very, very excited about, not going with expectations, because, for example, fans do that all too much. Like, look at WandaVision, Mephisto this, Mephisto that. I'll happily talk about those theories, even with, like, excitement and passion, but I never have that expectation for it to happen, because then those people, I'm not saying everyone does, it sets them up for disappointment when a certain thing doesn't happen, or they think this something would be really great. So with Hawkeye, like, I just came in with a neutral level, and with the vibes that they chucked at me, I was really pleasantly surprised. I thought it was fairly decent. It wasn't amazing. Like, I couldn't call it amazing, but the most important thing to me, whether there's plot holes or conveniences that happen in episodes, I can still really enjoy a show in a pretty subjective sense when the characters and the acting and what's going for them with a dynamic in terms of this, you know, Kate Bishop and Clint. And if you manage to set that up in a way that engrosses me, then, you know, that's got a tick in the, I would say, the most important box for me. And then everything else, you know, I grade in a separate way. So with that being said, guys, what did you think of the first 2 episodes of Hawkeye? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel like maybe they could have trimmed out a couple of moments here and there, for example, with the live-action roleplay stuff? I just hope that everything from here on out just maintains the current course of what I enjoyed most from these first 2 episodes. And the reason why that's so important to me is because I like Kate Bishop and Haley Steinfeld in this role so much. I'm looking forward to see her character grow, what Hawkeye as a father figure has to lend to this character who doesn't really have one, and certainly isn't looking for it in Jack. So that, going forward, is paramount to my experience, but what is paramount to your experience? And yeah, just let me know everything down in the comments below. Also theories from Jack, the Swordsman, Eleanor, or could she be the Madame Masque, and how are they going to adapt that in a situation if that is the case? Like this video if you did enjoy it. Obviously, with the weekly releases going out, they will be a bit more breakdown formulaic rather than like one big blubber of a review / breakdown like this video. Subscribe for those videos coming in the future weeks, of course, and I will see you people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the next video. Goodbye.